wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself and reservation. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself and reservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And hello to yet another edition of Political Unmuted, the show they cannot shut up. What number are we now, Paul? Are you able to tell us?
It is, I think it's 115.
Just goes on forever. Thank you so much for looking in. It's such a privilege. Before I start, I have to say that the music you were listening to was from a band called The Spires. The bass guitarist was my son, and today it's his birthday. I promised that I would give him a shout out, sort of at the beginning. Don't smile, Jane. At the beginning, so he didn't have to listen to the rest of the show. So that is just outrageous. When you look for support, where do you get it? But anyway, happy birthday to John Ross. And hello and welcome to my three wonderful guests. Extremely wonderful to see you all. Paul's the boss, of course, and we just love him to pieces. Every word he says, we hang on. Hiya, Paul.
Hi, how you doing?
And Jane is our resident brain box. Sort of, she knows a whole lot of things that none of the rest of us do. So we'll look forward to a moment of the week. And Bonnie, it's exciting to have you on the show.
Well, I wouldn't be too excited, John.
Oh, no, trust me. It's so lovely to see you. It's always lovely when you come. And I'm going to start with a moment of... I'm so excited I almost forgot the jingle. So we're going to start with you, Bonnie. Moment of your week. Let's hear what you got to tell us.
I've had a momentous week this last week. I've been at the NEU annual conference in Harrogate, but if I had to pick one or two moments of the week, I would pick the fact that two motions I was involved in writing in on inclusive curriculums and the primary curriculum both got passed, one of whom I got to use Paul's favourite phrase, post-Govian dystopia, in a speech that got applause. I've so stolen it from him. He's never getting it back.
Well, our teachers are naturally thieves. Sort of all the best teachers are sort of thieves who can't stop stealing. That they go through their whole life pinching good ideas, and well done to you. Successful conference?
Yes, I think so. We're up for a fight against the world, against the government, against Ofsted, against the government, against Ofsted.
You were saying earlier that you think you have a chance of winning with Ofsted.
We hope so. I hope that now that everything's coming out into the public about the damage that Ofsted caused and the stress that people are under, that actually the public turns against them. And what we've seen is that the head teachers unions are now starting to disengage. And to be honest, for a long time, they've propped the system up. So if they disengage, it's in their hands. They can stop this. And that's our message that we're asking the NAHT, whose General Secretary came and spoke to us and was brilliant, actually gave a magnificent speech.
Good. There's nothing wrong with having an independent observer coming in and saying what they think was good and what they think was bad and where you could improve and sort of things that you're good at. That's always lovely. Sort of nobody's wanting a free rein, but it's the way in which it's done, the way in which it's delivered, and particularly the fact that it's then publicised as a kind of either a black mark or a good mark for the school, and it affects the whole future, not of just the school, but of the teachers and the pupils there. It's a wicked institution, is Ofsted. And the sooner we replace it with a better advisory system, the better. Thank you so much for all you're doing. Who am I going to have? Jane, moment of you had 2 moments of the week, you said, so I'll let you have 2 this week.
Oh, thank you.
I know. Just
So today is the 4th anniversary of the imprisonment of Julian Assange in Belmarsh Prison, which is horrific, really horrific, and he needs to be freed immediately. And in meanwhile, Russian authorities are holding a Wall Street Journal reporter called Gershkovich on accusations of espionage, very similar to the charges that are being claimed against Julian Assange. And I've seen lots of people who aren't speaking out against the imprisonment of Julian Assange, speaking out about what Russia's doing in this circumstance. And it's really bizarre that they can't see that it's the same thing.
That needs rectifying, doesn't it? Thank you very much indeed. And finally, Paul, moment of your week.
I've got to go with the junior doctors strike. It's always one of those ones where you think doctors, they're well paid. When I was growing up, it was a really respected job, and you look like a lot of them are being published in their pay slips, and the rate at which they're being paid is really, really poor. And if you're considering the hours they work, a lot of the time it's less than minimum wage. And it's absolutely disgraceful. These are the people who are considered to be saving lives. And, like one of the things that gets thrown around a lot of the time when you mention you're a socialist is someone might say, oh, well, look at them in Cuba. Like the doctors have got to go and get second jobs and stuff like that. So if that's their level, and that's what's having to happen in this country now. But also, not only do they have to get second jobs or whatever if they want to make a living, or a lot of them are leaving, or lots of people don't want to do it. Lots of them are not being trained as well. Not only all that, they've got astronomical student loans to deal with, and that's something they don't have to deal with in Cuba, is it? Because they just get their education paid for as a right. So, if this is some sort of race to the bottom, we're winning. We're doing okay in this country if we're racing to the bottom, which it appears we are.
Yes. It's tremendously worrying when the junior doctors go on strike. You fear for people's safety, but it just shows what these dedicated people, what they've been pushed to by a government that needs getting rid of. Some lovely moments of the week. Neil Terry's moment of the week was seeing the "Not My King" placards. Personally, I have a lot more time for Charles than I have for Elizabeth, but sort of I'm a total Republican. So yes, "Not My King," fancy. Well done to the NEU conference, says Leanne, passing a motion supporting against the anti-strike laws. Really important. Leanne, moment of the week, seeing the huge support for Palestine at the emergency demo in Birmingham. Well done, yes, and very important at this moment, as both Sunak and Starmer come out strongly pro-Israel over a shooting. Moment of the week, Laura Lee Fem 93, Laura Lee FM, Laura Lee Fem. Oh, is this our Laura? Okay, another shooting in the USA, 5 dead. Yes, Laura Lee FM Fem says it's me. That's not much help, is it really? Okay, let's move on.
Now it's time for the big story.
Neil Terry says the low light of his week was that attack ad from Labour. We're on to it. So just keep listening, Neil. every week what I do is I look through the news and I say all the stories which caught my eye, and then I say to the team who are joining me, what do you want to talk about? And basically this is their choice, and they want to talk about voter ID and sort of boring. I'll have to wait and see. Sort of, Jane, what's it all about? What's all the fuss about?
So the government have brought in measures so that from the local elections happening this the 4th of May, there will be photo ID needed if you're going to vote in person at a polling station in England. So they've said, Sunak's spokesperson recently said that they're doing this to guard against potential for wrongdoing, which is quite strange when there's so many really dangerous things actually happening. Looking at the numbers on this, before they introduced it in 2018, there were 8 allegations of in-person voter fraud in the whole of England. And no action was taken in 7 of those. So there was one case that was actually pursued by the police in 2018, and those numbers are pretty consistent. In 2022, there were 7 allegations across the whole country, and none of them, there was not enough evidence for any of them to be pursued that there was wrongdoing. So this is something that's not actually happening. It's a problem that doesn't exist, but the government have decided that they're going to spend around £180 million a decade of our money on addressing this problem that doesn't exist, whilst they don't address other more pressing issues for us. So there have been allegations of voting fraud that were followed up on by the police. It's a relatively small number. I think it's less than 100 a year in Germany, but they're all in relation to campaigning, to people standing as candidates rather than voters, and a very tiny number of postal votes, which won't be addressed in any way by this new rule. But it will mean that over 2 million people in this country who don't have photo ID will not be able to vote in person if they want to, which is very sad and very undemocratic.
I mean, these 2 million people, Jane, would they have voted anyway?
Well, I think there's about 9 million people who aren't even on the electoral roll, and perhaps they wouldn't have done, but perhaps what we need to be thinking about is how to engage those people in voting. Those people deserve a voice as well. They deserve someone who will represent their views and something worth voting for. And perhaps they're not voting because they're not getting that from a government which is, predominantly filled with people from extremely privileged backgrounds who don't have any understanding of the issues that those people are going through every day. And perhaps if those people weren't in, unpaid care positions, looking after family and friends, or working in gig economy jobs and exhausted, perhaps they'd have time to think about things like voting. But perhaps because of the poor conditions that many people are living in this country, they don't have time to think about it when they know that there's not really anyone who's going to help them anyway.
I mean, I suppose that fits in with what you were saying, that this is not the real problem. The real problem is sort of the disengagement of people from voting, and it's that they should be trying to sort out. Paul, Jane's spoken of the dangers and problems. I mean, what are the problems associated with demanding that people get voter ID? And particularly, I was looking at Polly Toynbee's article in the Guardian, where she says it's a direct attack on youth and on minorities of all kinds. I mean, is this really such a dictatorial act as is being made out?
It's much less likely that younger people will have the kind of ID that is necessary. And if you looked at all the list of ID, it wasn't like there were a lot more options for older people. And it seems to be weighted towards the idea is that older people are more likely to vote Tory, therefore like they're more likely to have the opportunity to vote. Voter fraud is really, really, really low. And I don't understand why they would concentrate on a problem like I think there are about 10 times more Tory MPs convicted of sex crimes than there are of voter fraud. Like it's a really, really, like, that's not an exact quote, but it is a lot more. It is a lot more Tory MPs have done sex crimes than people have done voter fraud in a country of 60 million people. It's an absolutely bonkers statistic, but there we are. So they're focusing on a problem that isn't. So therefore, you think, well, if it isn't a problem, then why do they feel the need to deal with it? And I think there's a couple of reasons here. One is to encourage more people to carry ID, so that there's more control over people. Like if you move towards that ID society where everyone has to be checked everywhere, then sort of you can lose that freedom a little bit if people just, I don't know, maybe you'll see more ID checks and stuff like that in future. Maybe that's what they're pushing towards, or maybe they just don't want people to vote as much. I think the whole political system is pushing us towards not voting as much, because we've got Labour and the Tories both saying the exact same things. People totally unenthused about it. Only the most boring rules boffins seem to be interested in voting at all at the moment, because there isn't any alternative. And then it's really, really hard. And by the time you say, oh, well, you know what, I'm going to have to dig out my passport, I'm going to have to do X, Y, and Z, even those with ID are probably going to think, do you know what? To vote for these idiots, I can't be bothered. I really can't be bothered. And I think it's more to do with that apathetic thing, like, I don't think we particularly live in a democracy. We live in a very, like, in an illusion of democracy. Like, we get to vote every few years on which people represent us, but we don't really get a say in what's going on, and they just give their opinion on things, and their opinion's actually really diluted because they're in this massive party system. How much say do any of us have? Less and less. And when you have, like, the likes of, the World Economic Forum, which, like, is very interested in getting involved in lots of different activities at governance level, or the Trilateral Commission that Keir Starmer's a member of, or was a member of until recently, which thinks that corporations should have more say than people. We're in real serious trouble here. Ordinary people aren't really having much say in their lives at all. And I think that's the biggest problem here. And whilst that's going on, they also don't want to, because they are bored to death of the whole situation.
I mean, lots of comments coming up here. Neil Terry, they don't want poor people and black people to vote. Those are the people who don't have photo ID. It's direct attack on them.
It's interesting though, but they're not necessarily, like, I think last time around they would have been much more likely to vote Labour. I think Labour will have lost a lot of the young vote and a lot of the non-white vote. Let's put it that way, because a lot of those communities feel really let down, especially Muslim people, and the way the Ford report has been treated in the Labour Party. People do know about these things, and I think they'll get a quite a nasty surprise when it comes to areas that they think will simply vote Labour because they've been told to.
Well, we will be talking about that at the end of the show, I suspect. Leanne, elderly people can use a bus pass as ID, students can't. I mean, that's just unbelievably stupid. But then she says, well, who's more likely to vote Tory? And perhaps that leads on to Laura Leaf 93's comment, which says, unforgivable. Oh no, wrong one. Mark Rattigan. Sorry, Laura. Voter ID is voter suppression. Classic US Republican dirty trick. Mark Lungley, same thing. Play right out of the Republican playbook. Stuart Sutherland, some ID tips are valid for only for over 65s. Neil Terry, come on, Paul. The Tories are great at finding solutions to non-existent problems. I think most of the things that the Tories do is not address the problem at all. It's in order to win votes with their constituency. Mark Lungley, why not put a photo? I'll ask you this, Fonny, when I come to you. Why not put a photo on the NI card? And now that's about it's Mark Rattigan, you've hit the nail on the head, Paul. Our democracy is superficial. MPs should be direct representatives of their constituencies, not representatives of a party line. Wow, that's radical. I just got one question for you, Vonnie. Does it matter? Does it matter? Basically, if anybody wants to vote, you can vote. And sort of you just send off and they'll give you a free piece of paper identifying you, which will, if anybody really wants to vote, the lack of photo ID need not be a barrier to that. So people who don't get it are the people who didn't want sufficiently to vote. So is this just a storm in a teacup? Sort of, and an invention by Labour because they fear that their vote may be a bit too flaky to survive searching out your photo ID. Is it as important as people are making out?
I think it is. I really think it is, and I don't think it's anything to do with Labour being flaky. They are flaky, but that isn't why. I think it's part of a bigger picture. Just to that point about the national insurance card there, I just want to address that. You don't get a national insurance card anymore. You get a letter that you're not to lose and it's got your national insurance number on it. They haven't given out cards for years. So that was obviously someone of my era where we did get cards.
My age.
my age still got cards. I know that my child's age, they got a letter that they're not to lose. A bit of paper. So, it's entirely about, I'm Paul stole most of my lines there. that was always the fear coming after Paul. It's that thing. I think it is about encouraging a sort of towards an ID state, towards having more control and giving us less freedom because they can say, show us your ID. I do think there's no evidence that it improves. In fact, the evidence shows that it actually suppresses the vote. There's years of evidence in America. I mean, it was alluded to there by one of the comments. It's a Republican dirty trick. In the US, they have ID cards. They have to show ID to vote. And it is the same people that do not turn out and vote. It's the people who are poor, unemployed, of various minorities, people who are disabled by society, those with low qualifications and those who've never voted before. So the problem is voter suppression. We don't have a representative democracy anymore. We have two-party politics of two parties with the same politics at the minute, which are both representative of the status quo and the elite. There is that lack of choice. As I said, Paul stole all my lines. I was going down ticking the ones that Paul said on my piece of paper here. I do think it's going to the voter numbers are going to be suppressed and it is going to affect the Labour vote, but I don't think they really care about that because I don't think it's about who's in power anymore. It's about maintaining the status quo. But I will come on to that more later on.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, my point would be, if I was asked about this, would be that it utterly misses the mark of what's wrong with our electoral system. And so many things they could have done to make us a more vibrant democracy, and they've chosen this repressive action. In this day and age, why are we not voting online? Why can you not? You can register online. Why the hell can't you vote online? Jane's absolutely correct when she says that the rules about people going to the polling station don't apply to the people who will be asking for postal votes and getting postal votes. And actually, there's a much greater opportunity for voter fraud with postal votes, where a husband can fill in his wife's, his daughters, his sons, and his next door neighbours' forms and send them off, and nobody will be able to stop him or ever find out. Than there is when the Electoral Reform Society, one of their complaints was that actually it's just not worth trying voter fraud because it's just one vote in tens and tens of thousands. And so what difference is it going to make anyway? The whole thing is outrageous. Paul, finishes off on this, and what would you? Did you just want this abolishing? I mean, it's here to stay now, isn't it? Do we need to change it? Can we modify it so it's acceptable, or do we just need to campaign to get rid of it?
So we've just apathied this into existence, haven't we? Like, you know, we've been talking about it for years and like, oh no, it's a bad thing, and I think it's roundly expected to be a bad thing. But these things just happen anyway. You know, these things just happen. And that is the state of our democracy at the moment. Like I've been saying for a long time, we need something radically different from what we do. And Mark kind of alluded to a form of direct democracy there where like constituents are more involved in what's going on. I'm for bottom up democracy. You know, I think democracy needs to come from the grassroots. People will talk about things they want, and I'm not talking about these stupid focus groups where they ask like someone whose biggest thing is there's someone smoking marijuana next door, or like you know, the things they've been coming up with on the things that annoy like some sort of random person from Burnley. Nothing against people in Burnley, but you know what I mean, like not that kind of thing. What we really need to find out is what communities want, what they would like to see, and we've never been further from that in a very very long time. Like obviously there are dictatorships, there are complete where people don't have even the illusion of democracy, but we're not far away from not having any say whatsoever. And I think most people feel that whatever they think doesn't matter at all. And I often find it very interesting when there's someone who appears to have very different opinions to me. So someone who might consider themselves to be right wing, and you get talking and they're annoyed about the exact same things that I'm annoyed about. It's just they don't really know how to go about it in any other way than what they're told to by the right wing media, which again is another huge problem in our democracy, in that our press are the illusion of free, because you know the people who fund the press are the people who fund the political parties. They get whatever they want, you know. So it's a really really worrying situation. So I guess what I'd like to see is more independent media pushed, and greater democracy from a grassroots level.
Jane, the not the electrical commission. So that's an energy problem. We'll deal with that later. The electoral commission are saying that they're going to really push voter ID and the need for a voter ID, and that they're hoping that with sort of. Have you come across any of these advertisements that they say they're going to put out? Will that be any help, do you think?
It would have been helpful if there had been a public information campaign going back over the last few months, especially with the local elections coming up at the beginning of May. I think, are there 2.5 weeks left to apply? You can get a free ID card for your council, and you need to apply online, I believe. But you've only got 2.5 weeks left to do that now if you want to be able to use it to vote in the local elections. And I've seen absolutely no advertising to make people aware of that. So they think there are 2.1 million people in the country who don't have photo ID they can use. And I think on Sunday only 37,000 people had applied for these free ID cards. And I think a lot of people don't know about them at all, or don't know how to get them. And I just wanted to mention one thing that really makes me angry about this. It's not silly really, but the Oyster cards, an over 60s Oyster card is valid ID. A 18 plus Oyster card is not valid ID. So I can see, you could plausibly make a argument maybe with the bus pass. I don't know if with the bus pass is being issued when you become of a certain age, perhaps they go through some sort of official process that you could argue that a young person's rail card doesn't, but an Oyster card is issued by the same people, whichever one you have. So there's absolutely no justification for that. It's blatant discrimination against younger people.
Yes, it's challenging. I wish somebody challenging it. Sort of Maria Nelson there detailing the difficulties in getting a form of ID that will be accepted. Can somebody, can one of our justicios, find out the link, please, that goes to the government? So the government has the thing where you can apply, as Jane says, for voter ID from your council, and they will issue that. Can somebody find that link? Oh, Neil Terry, I've already posted it above. Neil Terry, we've got it here. Jacqueline Hemmings, https://www.gov.uk, and then all with slash and all with hyphens, apply for photo ID, voter authority certificate. It's there. If you have anywhere, well done, Neil Terry. God bless you. And the justicios come good. Yes, again. Let's move on. Honey, it's sewage, it's river sewage. Were you going first on this one?
No.
It's Paul's going first.
It's Paul.
Messed up, everybody.
It's all right.
Paul, okay, what's the problem? Who's responsible?
The problem is we've got this awful situation where people don't seem to care about the thing that keeps us alive in this country as a fundamental human right. And I think this is the root of the problem, and I can talk about like the symptoms of the problem in a minute, but that is the clear thing. Like, water is absolutely vital to our survival as human beings, but we're seeing increasingly that people want to commodify it. People want, if everyone needs it, then that's something we can make money out of. And that is what it's become. And, I think it was privatised in the UK in 1980. The water supply was privatised. And, since then we've seen companies, private companies, which are monopolies, really. So, the private sector, we're always sold this myth that, the private sector will make everything cheaper because you will have a choice. And we're seeing the problem in the energy companies. You can't even switch energy companies, so that's a monopoly now as well. But in my area, I've got to have Northumbria Water. That's it. I don't have any choice. There isn't any competition for who supplies the water to my pipes that come to my house, which there's only one set of. There's not actually you could use their pipes or their pipes. It's a ridiculous system. So you've got this system where one company can make profit out of my use. I have to pay them. They have to set the price, and that's it. But they have a moral responsibility to make sure that the waterways in the area are clean, that the lakes are all fixed, that there's no water wastage, that there's no sewage going into our rivers, and everything's nice and clean. And yet they are prioritising profits. So 50 billion has been paid out this is news from 2022. 50 billion has been paid out in profits since privatisation to shareholders. You're seeing CEOs on massive wages, and also people are saying, they can't invest in it, it's not a profitable thing. They're in huge debt as well. So all the water companies have taken out huge loans and things like that, and I think they're in 52 billions worth of debt, the water companies, if you combine all their debt. Now this is a very, very, very problematic business model of something that should be run for the public, by the public. Some other countries, they're shocked at how we treat water. If you wander around in Rome or something like that, there's water just flowing from little fountains in the streets. They take great pride in how things look, and that water is a fundamental human right. And we simply don't. We see it in this country as being something to take money out of your pocket for. So our rivers are absolutely full of sewage because we're allowed to pump raw sewage into them if we need to. If you look at something like a dairy farms can pump sewage straight into rivers, which is killing our ecosystems. So there's huge problems there. Our seas, they're dumping a load of raw sewage onto our seas. So we have all these is it the blue kite mark, the blue flag beaches that used to be the sign of cleanliness. I think there's been 150 of them have ended up with raw sewage dumped onto them. The Tories have actually given up, and they've said, well, you know, it's probably not even a practical ambition to have clean water. You know, so Theresa Coffey was apparently saying something along those lines. So like they don't even care that our water is absolutely filthy. And then also I want to refer to a local issue here. Now in Redcar in Cleveland, we're having huge problems of crustaceans and other types of sea life dying en masse. And what a lot of people believe it is for the Freeport in Teesside, they've been dredging, and they've been trying to, and what they've done is, because it was such a heavily industrialized area and lots of things were dumped in there, the things that are being released from the dredge are killing the sea life. And you go, and it looks apocalyptic. I've shared photos on socialist think tanks pages before of apocalyptic scenes of crustaceans dying on the beach. It is like, it makes me want to cry, to be honest. If people, like, I don't want to get on the high horse about being a vegan or whatever like that, but I don't like seeing animals suffer in any way. But I think most people, whether they eat meat or whether they don't or whatever, they see these things and they see these creatures suffering, and they see the idea of like fishermen who've been doing this for years and years and years, who've been doing it in a sustainable way, going out and using lobster pots in a sustainable way, making sure they throw back young fish and all these things they've learned, passed down through the generations, now suddenly seeing their potential livelihood go away for generations to come. It's just gone. They've just ruined people's lives. They've ruined, you know, an ecosystem. What's going to happen now? What's going to happen with those? Is it going to continue to be uninhabitable for these animals, or will it wash away into the ocean, into the sea, into the ocean somewhere else? I don't know, but that's an ecosystem absolutely ruined, something that was relatively in balance. And if people have gone around doing the right thing and making sure they don't overfish, which is a terrible thing that happens around the world with trawlers and what have you, they've done it sustainably, and yet that's their reward. But you're going to get a Freeport. So, you know, you might have dirty, filthy water that you got to drink that's got poo in it and condoms and things like that. But someone's going to be able to not pay the taxes near you.
Local Labour is campaigning against the Freeport full stop, and campaigning hard about the dredging. Vonnie, thinking about the sewage in the rivers, Tory, Labour, Lib Dem and Green have all come up with their plans. And one of my questions was sort of, you know, what do our guests think about? What do you think about those plans? What's your judgment on the 4 solutions to the problem?
Oh, well, I read up on this. I knew nothing about this until today. Really, not a lot. You know, I knew I was there, but I didn't know any of the details. And actually, the details are rubbish. The plans, I'm not, you know, the Tories are ignoring it. They don't really have a plan. They've said it's unsustainable to go back to where we were before the Industrial Revolution, basically. That's Theresa Coffey's stance. I think she used the example of knocking down half of Sheffield to put the River Don back. Nobody could do that. They don't really have a plan, the Tories. I don't think, well, they just don't care. It's all about capitalism and money. Labour's plan, they're going to mandatory monitor sewage facilities. Do they not? Is that not happening already? I would think from a health and safety at work point of view, sewage facilities are probably monitored. They're going to have automatic fines for companies that don't fill their thing, and water bosses are going to be held professionally and personally accountable, whatever that may mean. I don't even know what that means. It just sounds like words that they've put down to look like they mean something. It's certainly not going to help clean the rivers. The Lib Dems, It's very tourism focused. It's about the beaches. It's about the things that get the headlines. You can't go swimming in it. But basically, it's no bonuses for execs. So if a water company or a sewage company, they're going to try and stop them giving them bonuses. Green Party again doesn't go far enough, which I was really disappointed at. They've called to end shareholders' payouts until they sort out the sewage problems. Now, that actually is one that does attack the capitalist system. I get that in a way, not deeply, just on the surface, but at least it's saying, put the water before the profits, which none of the others do. But none of them are addressing the point that there's been that much damage done. Our water system is a closed system. There's a finite amount of water on the planet. You don't get any more water, you don't get any less water. There is that amount of water on the planet. And the more of it that is unusable to help us live, not just us, all of the other life on the planet, the less healthy our ecosystem is going to be. And things like that are happening down our coastline there are going to keep happening all over the world. I know a little bit about that because at our last Union Regional Council, we had someone come to talk about the independent scientific study they're trying to get done to prove the damage that's been done by the dredging, because we agreed to give them some money. So we know a little bit about that. There was someone from Hartlepool came and spoke to us, and then it brought along a professor from the university who's involved in the independent study. So I know there's campaigning going on, but there isn't an answer there from any of the main political parties, even the Green Party, who you would think this was their thing.
If I told you the Green Party wanted to renationalise the water, would you be because they have? I mean, does this affect your opinion of the?
It would be it would help. That would help, but how long will it take to do? Is it going to stop why is this not a national emergency? Why is it not an international emergency?
Yes.
We have one planet. Nobody is going far enough to fix it. Yeah. Nobody. Yeah. And that's the way, the Green Party, their policy thing about, obviously they want to move towards the renationalising the water, but their stopgap policy of wanting to end shareholders' payouts doesn't go far enough.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, Vonnie there, Jane, hit the nail on the head. The issue here is wider than just water companies discharging sewage into the rivers at a phenomenal rate.
Yeah, I was surprised to read actually, because I don't remember hearing about this at the time. But in 2012, the EU Commission took the UK government to the European Court of Justice regarding water companies dumping sewage in the rivers, and ruled that it was illegal, that was happening, and that sewage overflows should only be used in exceptional circumstances. So I'm not quite sure what penalties were imposed for that or what came of that, because it seems like since then things have just been stepped up at a ridiculous rate. So I remember reading recently that I can't remember how many years ago, but not very many, certainly in the 2000s, that there were 16,000 discharges in 1 year. Not that many years ago, and now it's in the hundreds of thousands. So that's some incredible pace. It's really scary, and we're not moving fast enough. I was reading about the problems with the phosphorus pollution, which is mainly caused by sewage waterworks in this country. And I was reading that only 24% of our sewage treatment works have phosphorus removal systems. And this is a real problem for us because this is a big issue, and the phosphorus is killing plants and animals and sea life in our rivers. But there's no real plan to do much about it. And the government in December gave the water companies an extra year on top of what they'd already been given to sort it out. So now they've extended it to 2028. But even the plans that seem to be on the table for these companies, incredibly lacking. Then talking about increasing from 24% to 37% of their facilities having it in that time. And this, like when it says this is an emergency now, this can't wait all these years. They've handed up so much money to shareholders. They've got CEOs being paid more than £1 million a year and handed huge bonuses on top. No one needs to be given that much money, and they just can't countenance being less greedy and actually using the money to invest in infrastructure and make a real difference. Other countries manage to do this. We're quite isolated in how shockingly we've failed with this because of this ideological obsession of our government with privatising public services. They'll cling on to it with everything they've got, no matter how much evidence there is that it's causing huge harm. They just can't countenance another way.
Thank you, Jane. I mean, hitting the nail on the head. They've just handed us over for exploitation. Stuart Sutherland, thank you. He's at topofthepoops.org. Apparently is a map of the sewage. Thank you very much for your comments, people. Deeply distressing to hear what you've got to say. The last one, I don't know, is more about gutters, really, isn't it? It's the latest Labour Party advertising campaign, which has decided to target Rishi Sunak personally, to accuse him of the failings. I've got thoughts on that, but I'm not going to share them. And of course, the one that's attracted all the attention is one where they've accused him of not wanting to deal with paedophiles. That was created 6 days of outrage, and the Labour Party has doubled down and said, no, we're proud of this meme. It all needed saying. Vonnie, have we really plumbed the gutter of politics in this country with this?
We're certainly heading down there. I think we're below the gutter. I think we're in the sewers, going back to sewerage, to be fair. I think we're in some kind of depths of dystopian hell. I printed out the attack ad, that particular one. Do you think, just so I could read it word for word without having to flick through my screen, do you think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't. What? Without reading the rest of it, what on earth is that all about? I do not think for a second that Rishi Sunak does not think that paedophiles shouldn't go to prison. I mean, that's ridiculous. What the Labour Party are doing is something so cynical, so horrible. We could be in America, in one of those really horrible, dodgy presidential races. And we're actually in the run-up to local elections where Rishi Sunak isn't even up for election. This is how far into the gutter we've gone. And, you know, it's in the light of what's gone on in the past few years, particularly, I know Neil Terry's probably going to reference this somewhere on the chat, what's gone on in South Yorkshire and Rotherham, and all of the things that the fascists have used to fling mud at refugees about Asian grooming gangs, to put a picture of an Asian man with that and use it as a political attack ad is just absolutely disgusting. And I would not have expected that even from Keir Starmer's Labour. So I'm truly disgusted by it, to be honest. It's, you know, the one that they followed it up with is the one about Sunak's wife and tax loopholes. Again, it's deeply personal. It's not quite as heinous as the last one, in the sense it doesn't have that dog whistle racism on it. But it's still, what are we doing? What is happening in this country that our party of the workers, the Labour Party is supposed to be the party of the workers, is doing this? Why are we going down into the gutter, or into the sewers, in fact, and, you know, in a local election campaign and doing this? It's awful. We expected a little bit of the Tories, because they generally historically have used this sort of, what they did to Jeremy Corbyn was disgraceful. What the Labour Party have done to Jeremy Corbyn is disgraceful. I'm quite happy to go on record saying that. But this is some,
I'm going
two
to
wrongs don't make a right, John.
I mean, you've just helped me segue perfectly into Jane's question, because what the Labour Party are saying is precisely what Vonnie has been saying, that they they've said they've taken advice from the Democrats in the US and from the Australian Labour Party, and their advice was the Tories are going to be filthy, dirty politics, and you've just got to play as dirty as them. And what Keir Starmer says is that if you find it squeamish, well, tough. We're going to fight as dirty as the Tories. Now, if sort of, I mean, what do you think of that argument? Is winning worth that approach?
So, I mean, assuming I even thought that this approach could win, I think what kind of a society are we wanting to have, and what kind of a society are they wanting to govern over? Are they wanting to stoke racial hatred? Are they happy to do that if they're the party in government? These personal attacks on one person as well, not quite sure what their thinking is. If Sunak stands down before the next election, I know it's highly unlikely, but the Conservatives are very good at knowing when they need to sacrifice someone for their own sake. They target everything at one person. I'm a little bit confused as to what they're going to do when Sunak goes off to do something else and someone else takes over. Maybe they can start again attacking someone else. I think what we're really seriously lacking in this country is open, informed debate. We saw it with Brexit. We talked about it constantly for 3 years, and the only words I remember are Brexit is Brexit and racist. I don't remember any other words being used in the whole discussion, this huge nuanced area that warranted lots of respectful, well-considered, intelligent discussion. Didn't happen. We don't have that in our politics, and I'm really sad that Labour are now buying into that and encouraging it. And when I read the comments that one of Keir Starmer's spokesman is said to have spoken about Yvette Cooper, I'm really sad at the stance she took to Jeremy Corbyn. But I think it's incredibly disrespectful the way she's been spoken about. I don't think it's right to speak about anyone in that way. And I don't think that's not the kind of society that I want to live in, where it's okay to treat people like that. We've already had incidents over the last few years where MPs have been murdered. And I'm gobsmacked that Labour think this is in any way okay, whatever they think they'll gain from it.
Jacqueline Hemmings, Corbyn would never have.
He was a much better person.
Yes, the world we have lost. Neil Terry, it's backfired though. I've seen one counter that says, do you know what it's like to choose between heating and eating? Rishi Sunak doesn't, nor does Keir Starmer. And Neil Terry, it almost makes you feel sorry for Sunak. And I think, Paul, is this a massive own goal for this Starmer campaign?
In a way, it has been, because the liberal media that very much support Labour like to think of themselves as the good guys. So, like all these liberal commentary out, the Guardian writers and what have you, they're very much in the, oh, well, actually, do we really want to get in the gutter and do this? Now they've decided that now they do, and it's fine. A lot of them, because I've reflected on this, and actually the Tories would have done this. They made up a lie about someone, suggesting that he didn't think paedophiles should go to jail. That's really bad. That's a really bad thing to say about anyone. I would not say that about my worst enemy. You can't go around saying that people don't care about paedophilia and stuff like that. Like, what horrible implications that has. That gets people killed, it gets people's windows put out around me. If they thought there was someone who's like a paedophile sympathiser around there, like, people would get attacked on the street for that kind of thing. This is really, 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 really bad. Not like, I don't really have a huge problem with going after Sunak personally on the things he's personally responsible for. Like, I've heard a rumour that they might be going after him for what he did in the world financial crisis, which, like, that's fair game. He actually did that, but making things up about him is a totally different thing. So people have looked into whether or not this is true, and they've actually found that the lenient sentences actually do have something to do with Starmer. when he was director of public prosecutions, and in the CPS and things, and they've looked into it, and he was in meetings that decided on more lenient sentences for for sex crimes around children, apparently, and there's a lot of evidence going around from the minutes of those meetings. So yeah, that's kind of backfired, and that's starting to appear in newspapers. He may have lost some sympathy with your Daily Mail, or he's probably not, to be honest. Like, there's a lot of nasty people who he's trying to pinch the vote of might be like, yeah, it's fine, like, you can say things like that. They might be okay with it, but the people who I know in the Labour Party, the Labour right, they don't seem to care what's done. They seem to care more about who's doing it. So they would say, oh, that's dirty tactics if it's against them, but if it's for them, it's fair game. But that's not me. That's never been me. You have certain standards that you live by, and you must live by them. And regardless of whether it's towards an enemy or a friend, you uphold your own principles. For me, that's much more important than achieving power, because what is the point of beating the Tories by just becoming them? That seems to be the argument. Yes, we should do this because that's what the Tories do. Well, so you've nicked all the policies from the Tories, and you've nicked all the tactics from the Tories. So what are you? You're just Tories. Like, this is not good. This is not a good look for anyone. It's saddening to see the state of our politics, and it's saddening to see the people who just don't have any principles. Like, there's always that famous thing that Laura talks about where Phil Wilson said, oh, what's the point in principles without power? And she said, what's the point in power without principles? The Labour Party, to me, appears to just think that power is really important, and it doesn't matter what is done, it matters who is doing it. So let's keep the establishment exactly as it is, but we'll be in charge rather than the posh boys. Like, they often accuse the left of being snobby and stuff like that, but when you see it, it's like, oh, all these left-wing people who are actually middle class and went to university, they're really, really snobbish about people's backgrounds. They really care about that kind of thing. And the likes of Rachel Reeves, like, she only wants to be in charge of the current system. She doesn't want to change the current system to make it better than people. She just doesn't want to see posh people, because she resents the posh people who got to university like her. And maybe that's fair game. Maybe they shouldn't have the free ride that they get. But that's the motivation behind the Labour Party at the minute. It's like, I've dragged myself up. I deserve my success. I got it all on my own. These people got a leg up and stuff like that, not realising that they've also had some advantages in their lives too. Yes. But yeah. So, yeah, that's where we are.
This for me, and I'm going to comment, is absolutely what my guests have said, that it's two establishment suits shouting nonce at each other. And that's what our politics has been dragged down to. And I wasn't a communist at the time. I wouldn't have counted it. But when you look at the kind of standards that Corbyn wanted, and we've let our Labour Party be dragged down to this. One of the sources that I gave my guests to look at was an article by the Secret Barrister, and that's really worthwhile reading. And I'll put the link into the chat at the end when we come off. And he says it's the same as we said about voter ID and we said about the sewage in the river. That what all this is, it's a distraction from what is really wrong with the criminal justice system. What's wrong with the criminal justice system is that we don't have good enough court, we don't have enough courts, we don't have enough lawyers, we don't bring enough criminals to justice. It takes years and years and years. We're not dealing properly with rape. We're not dealing properly with domestic abuse. We don't look at the prisoners when they come out of prison, so they just recidivize, or whatever the word is. It's an appalling system of justice we've got, and all they can think of is tougher sentences. And we have two establishment suits waving their willies as to how nasty they can be in sentencing, as though that is going to solve anything. The whole thing is just appalling. And I'm just so depressed after this week's discussion topics because we just have a political system which is ignoring the issues that matter and dealing with the flim flam on the surface. And I hope you're not as depressed after listening to my guests as I was after thinking about these subjects. That's it for this week, people, with a little bit of run from me. I hope you don't mind. And I'm going to say thank you to my wonderful Bonnie. Thank you for coming on. We don't have you on often enough. God bless you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's a delight. Thank you for your comments. They were really to point. Jane, as always, telling me things I didn't know. Just wonderful. And Paul, the boss, as always, again, we have everybody saying how brilliant your comments are. It's very depressing for the rest of us. And I'm going to say goodbye to you, listeners. Until next week, we will be back. We will not be muted. And I'm going to hand over to Paul to go through all the things he does and say goodbye himself. So goodbye from me. Thanks to my guests.
Firstly, thanks to John again. Brilliant show. Thank you. And the other guests, of course. Absolutely lovely to have you on. Vonnie and me always have the same opinions on everything, don't we?
Almost. There's some things we differ on.
Very, very mildly. Yeah, it's never a huge thing. We should get
cheese.
together and argue about the very slight differences we have in opinion sometimes. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the fifth panelist, who is you at home. You are absolutely brilliant. The comments tonight are massively high quality. Please do tell people about the show. Please do share this and like it and follow us on all our socials and all those things, and tell people to support independent media and do all we can to try and break through this narrative. I know you do this anyway, but keep going. It's really, really important. You can be a member of Socialist Think Tank. Just join on our website, socialistthinktank.com. You can buy some nice merch. I've got a little bit here, the Socialist Think Tank hoodie there. I think John might have his on sometimes as well.
Not this week. I was about to, but last week I did. This week it's great. The hoodie's just so comfortable and warm.
Yeah, they are nice. So if you do that, that'd be great. You can donate as well if you would like to. Thanks everyone again, and we will see you all next week. Oh, and we've got some more social ties coming out this weekend, actually. We're going around the Independent Media Association. I shouldn't forget that, should I? Laura's been doing absolutely loads of work, and Jane as well, around this. So we're going around different independent medias. We've got Dorset Eye coming up. They're going to tell us what they get up to in the independent media as well. So, that's something to look forward to. And take care, everyone. We will see you all soon.
Keep the red flag flying here.